We always talk about data, but what if it could do more than just tell us what's wrong? What if it could actually show us the way forward? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're looking at this really cool study that uses data to map out a path toward a fairer, more prosperous Indonesia. It's fascinating stuff, so let's get into it.
I mean, look, every country wants its people to thrive, right? That's kind of the whole point. But as we all know, it's really that simple. Prosperity doesn't always spread out evenly. It's not always that rising tide that lifts all boats. More often than not, some boats get left behind, sometimes entire regions.
Okay, so get a load of this number, 22.82%. That's not just some random stat. That is the massive, staggering gap in poverty between the richest and poorest provinces in Indonesia back in 2021. And you got to remember, behind that number, that's a huge difference in people's lives. We're talking about opportunity, healthcare, education, everything, for millions and millions of people.
So that's the big question, isn't it? When you see a gap that huge, it can feel, well, kind of hopeless. But here's the thing. What if we could use data to map it out? Like really map it out with precision? What if we could use that map not just to stare at the problem, but to actually find a way to, bridge that gap?
All right, so let's frame this. We're talking about Indonesia's welfare puzzle. It's a big one. How can one single country have such wildly different realities from one island to another?
And this isn't just about economics or policy goals. This is about a promise that's literally written into the country's constitution. It says right there the government's job is to promote welfare and social justice for all Indonesians. So what this study really does is hold up a mirror to that promise and shows just how big the gap is between that ideal and what's actually happening on the ground.
And here's where that reality gets crystal clear. Look at this. On one side, you've got Papua New Guinea. More than a quarter of the people there are living in poverty. On the other end of the spectrum, South Kalimantan, where the rate is almost 6 times lower. When you see those numbers right next to each other, wow, it's just impossible to look away.
Okay, so how do you even begin to tackle a problem this big? Well, first things first, the researchers needed the right toolkit. They had to figure out a way to measure well-being that was fair and consistent across all 34 provinces.
And they landed on 4 really key indicators to paint a full picture. See, it wasn't just about the money. That's the percentage of poor population. They also looked at life expectancy. How long are people living? Are they healthy? And then there's the average years of schooling. What kind of education and opportunities are people getting? And finally, they threw in population density to kind of give it all context. You put those 4 things together, and suddenly you have a much, much clearer picture of what life is actually like.
So they've got all this data. Now what? The next challenge was to find the patterns hiding inside all those numbers. You have data from 34 different places. How on earth do you make sense of it all?
This is where a pretty powerful tool comes in, called Hierarchical Cluster Analysis. Now, I know that sounds super technical, but the idea behind it is actually dead simple. Just imagine you dump a giant bag of mixed-up Legos on the floor. This method is like a smart machine that automatically sorts them into piles for you. All the red squares over here, all the blue long pieces over there, based on what they have in common. Except, in our case, the Legos are the provinces, and the machine is sorting them based on those 4 welfare indicators we just talked about.
But here's the cool part. Just like with Legos, there's more than one way to sort them, right? You could sort by color or by shape, so the researchers had to pick the best sorting rule. And this table here shows exactly how they did it. Think of that cophonetic correlation number as an accuracy score. The closer it is to 1, the better the sort. And as you can plainly see, the average linkage method got the highest score. That's how they knew it was the most trustworthy way to group the provinces for this analysis.
So, the machine did its sorting. And what did it find? This is the moment where it all comes together. The analysis didn't find a messy, complicated mix. Nope, it found 3, just 3, clear, distinct groups of provinces. And this is what that sorting looks like. It's a chart called a dendrogram. And I know it looks a little crazy, but just think of it like a family tree for Indonesia's provinces. The branches show which provinces are the most alike, based on all that welfare data. See how they connect and form bigger and bigger branches? Well, those big branches, those are the 3 main groups we're talking about. Let's break that down in the simplest way possible. Here's what the data found. There was just one, province in the high welfare group. 6 provinces landed in the medium group. And then, a whopping 27 provinces, the vast majority, were sorted into the low welfare group. Just think about that imbalance for a second. So what makes these groups different?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. That huge cluster of 27 provinces, the low welfare group, they're defined by high poverty and lower life expectancy and schooling. The medium group of 6, they're kind of in the middle across the board. And that single province in the high welfare group, which happens to be the capital, DKI Jakarta, it has the complete opposite profile. Low poverty, high life expectancy, and more years of schooling.
And if you want to see that difference in a really stark way, just look at this chart. This tells the whole story. Look at the massive gap in the poverty rate between the high and low welfare groups. It's not a small difference, it's a chasm. And you see that same huge divide when you look at education too. This is what that data inequality looks like, visualized.
Okay, so this is where we get to the most important part of this whole thing, because all this data, all this analysis, it's not just for an academic paper. It's about building a solution. It's basically a roadmap for action.
Yeah, this study is so much more than just an interesting piece of research. What it does is hand a clear, data-backed guide directly to the Indonesian government. It essentially takes the guesswork out of the equation. No more wondering where to help. The data pinpoints exactly where the need is most critical.
And the recommendation that comes out of it is crystal clear. First, you prioritize those 27 provinces that the data flagged in the low welfare cluster. But it gets even smarter. You can use this specific data, poverty, education, health, to tailor your policies. If a province is struggling with education, you focus there. If it's healthcare, you focus there. The whole point is to move beyond a one-size-fits-all plan and get to a much smarter, targeted, data-driven strategy. So at the end of the day, what this study has done is create a map, a really clear, precise map that shows the peaks and valleys of inequality across the country. The data has done its job. It's laid it all out. So the real question, the one that this leaves us with, is what happens next? What do you do with a map that clear?